Horror and fear is a universal language all around the world. It brings out that raw emotion that only that genre can make you feel. But in the media, horror is respected and celebrated. Horror films actually bring in some of the highest grossing franchises of all time and can make for very memorable characters and villains. It's a genre that is respected by so many different people and isn't just restricted to the silver screen. From the works of H.P. Lovecraft to Stephen King to Junji Ito to Robert Kirkman, and of course from gaming companies like Capcom to Nintendo. No matter where or what media you find yourself using, there's always going to be a horror genre there. There's always going to be something waiting in the corner for you to test those waters. Gaming in the late 90s had a boom of survival horror. I mean, this genre was everywhere, and it seemed like it wasn't going anywhere for a very long time. But that was until the early 2010s when it seems like there was no hope. Resident Evil all of a sudden became an over-the-top action explosive movie, Dead Space became a co-op based whatever it was, and well, Silent Hill was rest in peace. The genre just fell flat. Survival horror seemed to be dead, and this was unfortunate because people were asking for it a very long time. And it was safe to say a new survival horror game really had to mix it up and bring something new to the table to really be appreciated and loved. But people wanted something new, people wanted something old school, hard, challenge the player, save rooms, conserving your ammo, stuff like this. And in 2014 there was a glimmer of hope with The Evil Within, directed by Shinji Mikami, who's the same guy who brought us Resident Evil and Devil May Cry. On release, Evil Within really seemed like a big jar of Marmite. It's either you love it or hate it, and it was received with a lot of warm receptions, and honestly, it just feels kinda misunderstood. For this video, I wanted to add something new to the conversation and talk about Evil Within and how I believed it has been designed with horror in mind. When Evil Within was first released, it was seen as trying too hard to scare the player, and most people would probably agree that this game isn't scary at all. It's actually more fun than anything. But what if I told you that I believe this was on purpose, and actually is a social commentary on how we've become overly saturated to horror in cinema and even in gaming overall, and probably just a message to modern horror as a genre? People generally love watching horror movies. We get a kick out of it, subjecting ourselves to fears and stories that make our skin crawl. But the weirdest thing is we cheer in horror movies. We get excited, we high-five our best friend. For examples, when Jason punches off someone's head, or when the Thing morphs into a disgusting yet fantastic design. Things like this don't bother us, they excite us and make us want more. And Tango Games understand this, and they knew it from the get-go. This whole game itself is inspired by the movie genre of horror movies. I mean, look at these terrible black bars. Okay, first things first, we're gonna get rid of those. No thank you. They were a terrible design choice, but they were there to make you feel like you was more in a film. They wanted to make it feel a lot more cinematic than it actually was. They wanted you to feel like you were really in the scene. And plus the colour grading here and the harsh shadows is very similar to those of like a noir story, and even those of the terrible Saw movies when they all start putting that weird green filter over it. This game has a really fantastic aesthetic when you really look at it. It really does make the game pop, and it makes the world feel dirty and gritty just how they wanted it to be. In the first few seconds we're really thrown into the thick of it, and I'm not just talking about the barrel of blood, if you know what I mean. This game doesn't hold back. It's gruesome in every single moment that it can be. This game will make you watch and enjoy the gore. It isn't scary at all, no, but they could throw pools of blood at you and make you limp away and really engage the player in the same way that we would be engaged from Ripley running back into the base in Aliens. Things like this is really what make horror movie fans stay on edge. They love that excitement, they love that adrenaline, and they love that risk and that fear and that moment of death that could be around the corner. This game catches it within the first few seconds, and it really is enough to keep the player ready, locked in, and want to see more. I strongly believe that The Evil Within does everything it can to celebrate the victories of the genre over the past few decades, and it's clear as day and right in front of you. I actually want to talk about 3 of the main villains in this game: the Keeper, Laura, and the Sadist. What if I told you that all 3 of these villains actually are the embodiment of horror cinema over the last few decades? If we have a look at Laura, the long black hair, the screams, the sound of her throat being broken, I don't know if they ever make a note of that, I think it's just a nod to The Grudge, but these aesthetics are very much like we would see in the Eastern horror movies like The Ring, The Grudge, and it's just so cool how they embodied her. They really do make her feel intense, and she's easily the scariest monster out of the bunch, which is actually very similar to how a lot of people talk about Eastern Japanese horror movies, because a lot of people would say, oh yeah, no, Japanese horror movies are really scary. And now if we take a look at the Sadist, I strongly believe he's that embodiment of torture porn. He is our Saw series, Audition, even the Human Centipede, that ridiculous subgenre in horror that keeps on returning, even though you're obviously sick of it by now. Very much how he does in this game. And lastly, we can talk about the Keeper. The Keeper is easily the most iconic villain throughout this whole game, and I feel like that is intentionally on purpose. I know that he is also meant to be a subtle nod to Pyramid Head, which he does actually do several scenes as Pyramid Head does. They do make literally the same scene over and over again with him. It's a really cool way to nod to that, but he's also that slasher character. He's also that mascot, that icon, that memorable figure that you would see, just like Jason Voorhees. And even if you have a look at the apron, clearly has that little Leatherface inspiration. And also we could talk about Ruvik, which, you know, is a burn victim who controls his mind and the world that people are living in almost like a dream. And he's also voiced by the same guy who played Freddy Krueger in the reboot. Coincidence? And you're probably thinking I'm pulling a lot of this out of my arse, and don't get me wrong, I am. But this theory actually came to me when I was playing this game and I saw the posters in the city near the end of the game. These characters, Laura, the sadist, they had their own movie posters and covers. If you have a look at Laura's poster, the long-haired curse, which is an obvious nod to The Grudge, the poster is an exact remake of the Grudge poster, but with her mouth instead of the eyes looking through the hair. And if you have a look at the sadist, where it sort of almost confirmed all this for me, it's exactly the Saw poster. Instead of having an arm or a hand, it's just a chainsaw. And even the Saw word chainsaw stands out. They knew exactly what they were getting their inspirations from, and they knew exactly who they wanted to make their little subtle nods to, and I really do respect that. We can even look into it further from here. The overly red blood and the gore is very reminiscent of the work of Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead. The cinematography, the design, lighting often references the greats like Kubrick. The imagery of Laura looking through the window is very much like Kurosawa's The Loft, and the big disgusting designs of the spider monsters is very much like Junji Ito's Geo. This is all one big celebration of horror. It's something that everyone should engage on, and everyone who is a horror fan should not hate on, should not be like, oh, this game is a bit duh, but instead take it all in and really appreciate what you're looking at and appreciate other people's work. Appreciate what a community this really is. And it's not just cinema that it's celebrating, it's also looking at survival horror as a whole. The zombie and liquor scenes from Resident Evil are referenced here, almost shot by shot. The design of the Keeper, like I said earlier, is very much based on Pyramid Head, from him actually mimicking some of Pyramid Head's actions. And if Isaac Clarke was known for having a mean stomp, well then hell yeah, you know Sebastian's gonna have an even meaner stomp. It's something like this which I really do appreciate The Evil Within for. They don't want us to be terrified. Yes, they advertise themselves like a horror game, but it's a horror game with themes of horror. Instead, they want us to cheer. They want us to enjoy the ride, appreciate the tropes, appreciate the blood-soaked fun that this game throws you into. It's stuff like this which really make the Evil Within title itself very questionable. Maybe Evil Within isn't just talking about the mind of a psychopath, but instead talking about the mind of the audience as a whole. We've become so accustomed to horror, what really does scare us anymore? What evils really do lie within our own minds for us to get to that point of being scared? As I said earlier, after Dead Space 3 and Resident Evil 6, we thought there was no hope. We just forgot to enjoy the little things. Evil Within brought us everything that we love about horror together, from its designs to its showcasing its best to worst. Yes, you hate stamina, and yes, you hate running out of breath, but that is just a trope of horror. Of course that will happen. If someone's running, it's like, God, you get the fuck out of there! You're gonna run out of breath, and it adds to that intensity. It adds to that feeling of being chased and being on lockdown. The sequel actually very much is its own thing, and personally one of the best games that I think I've actually played this generation, and a lot of people haven't played it, so I really feel like people should probably play it a little bit more, give it a little bit more appreciation. But I also feel like it worked and actually improved on a lot of the first game's problems, but this is entirely intentional. There is this fantastic moment in the second game where it throws you back into the beginning of the first game, and it gives you a shot-from-shot remake of the first chase scene in the game where you're being chased by the sadist. And in this scene, it really does bring Sebastian all around as a character. It makes you realise what he's gone through, and it makes you realise that he's adapted and learned and actually over everything that happened in the first game. The first game had a lot of slow problems. It had ammo issues that people complained about, even though it's a survival horror game, and it also had just a storytelling problem. It wasn't that interesting and Sebastian felt like a blank slate, therefore number 2 made it so he feels a little bit more alive at least. But in this moment he's being chased by the sadist, and then he literally turns around and says, "I've had enough of this shit," kicks a gurney in the guy's face, and well, this takes place. And like that, Evil Within earned its horror cheer moment. It made you turn to your best friend next to you and high-fived. It knew and actually solidified itself in horror gaming as a whole. It had its own iconic scene. It had these moments which really brought the game all around and really makes you appreciate what the journey of Evil Within was. Sebastian wasn't saying "I've had enough of this shit" just to the villain, but I almost feel like to the tropes of old school horror as a whole. We've yet to see Evil Within 3, so we've yet to see how this series would evolve. I hope we do see it because it definitely deserves to see it. But horror as a genre is having a massive comeback, and it seriously has made a great turnaround, with Resident Evil 2 remake being amazing and Resident Evil 3 remake just being around the corner. We've seen horror and survival horror take a new stand, become something new, while at least still retaining some of that imagery and some of the mechanics that we love from old school survival horror. And while we keep moving forward and games and movies keep evolving and getting better and better, Evil Within really is a collection of the achievements over the last few decades of what horror has brought to the screen, to manga, to comics, to even gaming. Evil Within is far from being high art, it's far from being, well, a great game, but it is definitely worth your time as a horror fan. It feels misunderstood, but it's also there as a reminder of everything we want from horror and just a love letter to the genre as a whole. So maybe next time you're in the mood to play a horror game, or at least a game with horror themes, then how about you give this game a go? Take in its atmosphere, its inspirations, even look up its inspirations because you might find something that you really connect with. Have a look and delve deep into the references that they really make nods to, like this game clearly loves the genre as a whole. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I've actually got a new PC, so now I'm actually able to use After Effects and do new edits. So I hope this video comes out looking cool. And obviously let me know what you thought of this video. It's something new, it's something a little bit more serious I wanted to talk on. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you liked, please like the video. Of course, please subscribe. There's going to be a lot more like this, hopefully every single week if I can stay on top of it. And of course, I'll see you at the next checkpoint. Goodbye.